Good morning. The hour of 10 o'clock having passed, I'm going to call this meeting of the House Judiciary Committee to order. And the first order of business is we are going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order is for the secretary to call the roll, please.
Chairman Kaufman,
Present
Representatives Bonner,
by designation.
Dowling, he's on leave,
On leave.
Ecker,
By designation.
Hershey, Joswiak, Kale,
By designation.
Clunk, Knowles, Lewis, Mahalik,
By designation.
Millard,
By designation.
Rigby, Schemmel,
By. Oh, you're
Stevens.
sitting on the wrong side there, Paul.
Stevens, Chairman Briggs,
Here.
Representatives Dawkins, Hanbidge, Hohenstein, Kincaid, Lee,
Designation.
Rabb, Schusterman, Solomon, Zabel.
Thank you. The meeting is being recorded and streamed. Our first order of business today will be to call up House Bill 699, House Bill 770, House Bill 1538, and House Bill 1903 for the purpose of a motion. And with that, I will recognize the gentleman, Mr. Hershey.
Thank you, Chairman, for your time. And I certainly recognize the importance of these issues that we're bringing up today. And I think with the recent announcement of some federal bipartisan agreement on these issues, and with some of these bills seeking to undermine some of our state preemption laws that we currently have that have been the subject of numerous lawsuits that have gone to Commonwealth Court, I think the most appropriate motion for us today is to have this conversation at a later date. And so I move to re-refer these bills, House Bill 699, 770, 1538, and 1903 to the Local Government Committee.
The motion by Representative Hershey is to recommend re-referral to House Bill 699, House Bill 770, House Bill 1538, and House Bill 1903 to the Committee on Local Government. And that motion is seconded by Representative Rigby. Questions, comments on the motion? Chairman Briggs?
So when every day there's shootings, victims of gun violence, mass shootings, kids are at risk, shoppers are at risk, we're going to wait to send it to the Local Government Committee because the Senate has a framework? I think this is the most irresponsible action the committee could make. This is a day that I thought we were coming together to do our jobs, to protect our citizens, to deal with red flag law that a lot of us support, an assault weapon ban, safe storage. These are efforts that are supported by 80 to 90% of our citizens. And we're just gonna punt and re-refer this to a committee that has no relevant decision-making over this. We were here because the House Democrats did a discharge petition to have a conversation about gun violence. And we were here today, it's historic. You know, I was gonna thank you, Chairman, for having this conversation. You know, based on your comments that, you know, no bill like this is ever gonna come through my committee as long as I'm the chairman. I was impressed that you called today's meeting. But to send it to the Local Government Committees, a dereliction of our duty. If something happens between now and whenever the Local Government Committee convenes, blood's on your hands. This isn't just rhetoric. This is something that is upsetting all of my constituents. I hear about this every single day. And I'm very disappointed that we decide to take this kind of action on a day that the Senate decided to have a framework sponsored, agreed to by 10 Republican senators. But it's a framework that takes a baby step. We have an opportunity to talk about real bills that actually could have real impact. So I'm a strong no.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The blood on your hands rhetoric is the kind of rhetoric that has gotten us where we are in this nation. The blood is on the hands of the criminals who illegally obtain and use firearms in the city of Philadelphia and in other places around this country that are unfettered by the out-of-control district attorneys who fail to prosecute the crimes.
I thought we were talking about gun safety violence. That's what I thought we were talking about, Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Solomon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I really do think that we have a moral imperative to act and act now. Actually, in light of the bipartisan effort in the Senate, we should be encouraged, emboldened to act. It seems like every time we have the same exact story when it comes to any efforts on gun reform. We just had the atrocity in Uvalde, followed by what must have been the most deadliest weekend over Memorial Day weekend. And every single time the same thing happens. Our side talks about gun reform, and my friends on the other side talk about it's not the guns, it's the people, and call for mental health initiatives. I'm just wondering why that leads to constant inactivity. Nothing. Crickets. Silence. We have an opportunity to embrace both efforts, but do it now. People in my district, seniors who are scared to go out of their homes, parents who are scared to have their kids walk to school, and all individuals in my community who fear going to their local recreation centers. We can do better. We must do better for the people of Pennsylvania. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Schusterman.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to echo, I appreciate you bringing this meeting. And I look at all of us, my colleagues, and we need to be leaders in keeping people safe. And I just had a meeting with the police chief, and he said, please get the military-style weapons away from people. We cannot compete with that. And I happen to be in a district in Chester County where our police have every bell and whistle possible. They have all the support possible. And they are begging me to ban assault weapons. And I don't understand the need for assault weapons. I don't understand why an 18-year-old who can't even buy a six-pack needs an assault weapon. So we have the opportunity to lead, but currently we're being led both federally and by New York State. We have a deep history here in Pennsylvania. We need to step up and lead. And then I just want to mention the seniors, kind of echoing what Rep. Solomon said. The Republican, the Democratic, the I don't care about parties, the independents, seniors in Chester County want change. So let's give them change. It's time to listen to the people of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Representative Hambidge.
Thank you. I'm particularly concerned about the rhetoric around only criminals having access to guns or it being people that have illegally obtained firearms causing death. There are about 47,000 suicides in this country annually. 50% of them are by gun. And suicide is responsible for nearly 2/3 of gun deaths nationwide. One of the most at-risk groups for suicide by gun is our veterans, with nearly 1 in 5 gun suicide victims being veterans. 9 out of 10 people who attempt suicide do not reattempt. And I worked for years as a suicide prevention counselor, following instances of suicides in my life. And means reduction, taking guns out of people's hands, taking the means away from them where they can make short-term decisions with very long-term consequences, can protect so many lives. So for the sake of our veterans who work so hard for us and risk so much for us, and then come home and are dealing with issues, there are absolutely people who are in crisis, who need help before they do something drastic. And this ERPO bills in particular are a means to protect them. And by not bringing this legislation forward today, we do a disservice to our people and our veterans in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. I've given a lot of latitude on this issue and talking about everything except the motion. I would also respond to the representative. There is a 302 mental health commitment process that has worked in Pennsylvania, and that is something that is available for those mental health issues. We need to move on the motion. Does anyone have a comment on the motion? Representative Stevens.
Thank you. And I share many of Representative Hambidge's sentiments, but I have a question. Procedurally, I want to understand the paths here. So procedurally, what the vote or what the motion contemplates then is that this committee report out all 4 bills with a recommendation to the Speaker to re-refer them to the local government committee. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And so a no vote then would be a vote to not report the bills out to the full House with that recommendation, right?
It could be seen that way, correct.
So, okay, so when the bill gets to the House, because we're in June, do these bills automatically go to the Rules Committee, or does the Speaker refer them to a particular committee upon receiving our report back out?
That would have to be a question for the Speaker. That's not necessarily a question that I can answer. We are recommending the re-referral, and the Speaker would have to go from there.
Okay, so it's an interesting vote, right? Because there's a couple different ways to look at this. I share my colleagues from the other side of the aisle's feelings and concerns about wanting a vote on these bills. I mean, I want, one of them's mine, obviously, and I share the concerns. I'm not sure if the best way for us to get a vote, I'm just speaking openly here, I'm not sure if the best way for us to get a vote on these bills is to vote no and keep them in committee. The chairman respectfully has had his position. I know that Chairman Briggs mentioned it before. So there's an opportunity to at least advance them to the House floor. And I'm throwing that out there really for discussion, I guess, with the greater body here in the committee in terms of, for those of us that would like a vote on these bills, does it make sense to be a no, or does it make sense to be a yes? I'm kind of throwing that out there as a question.
Other comments on the motion? Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I believe that the local government committee is unequipped to handle these bills. All of them contemplate some kind of a criminal charge aspect. That is exactly what the Judiciary Committee is supposed to be for. If we are not going to contemplate them, how can we give them to a committee that does not have the knowledge and expertise to actually consider specifically criminal acts? Specifically with relation to the extreme risk protection order, Mr. Chairman, you brought up the fact that we have 302 laws or in place, but 302 permanently deprives people of their ability to have a firearm, ever. ERPO changed that.
I must correct the record. That is not correct. The federal government has determined that the 302 mental health commitment process doesn't permanently impair someone from their Second Amendment rights.
I've had a number of clients as an attorney that have had to go through the process and have not had their ability to have a firearm restored to them because they were 302'd. So that is an incorrect statement. But I think the more...
You can't argue the facts. The fact is that was a decision by the federal government. And it may be recent and something that you're not familiar with, but that doesn't make it not a fact.
As somebody who's actively practiced law, I think I have some experience. But the other aspect of this is that if we are going to have a motion that we are transferring this to the local government committee based on the idea that we have a Senate agreement on this, the Senate agreement, if anybody has looked at it, specifically contemplates giving incentives to states to pass ERPO legislation, specifically ERPO legislation. So why are we not bringing that up? And in the time that I've been here, and admittedly I haven't been here that long, but in the time that I've been here, I've never seen a bill be re-referred and not automatically go to that committee. We've never taken action on it on the floor. So this is an act of cowardice. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the motion? Representative Hohenstein.
Thank you, Chair. I think we need to be able to hear from the prime sponsors of these bills. I know it may be more in the line of courtesy, but it is a courtesy that is almost always extended when a committee hears someone's bill that the primary sponsor be permitted to speak. And I think the primary sponsors ought to be able to speak on a motion that would affect the time and the efficacy with which we dispose of the bills. We have an opportunity to vote on these bills now, get them to the floor, and have full votes on all of the issues as much as possible. I fear the referral back to local government would just be yet another delay in this process. So I would ask, and I do have, because I was requested by Representative Frankel, Chairman Frankel, who is chairing his own committee right now, but is prime sponsor on House Bill 1538. He had asked me to present his comments, and I think his comments
on the motion
do speak. Well, they do speak to the motion in the sense that they speak to the urgency of hearing and determining the fate of House Bill 1538 as soon as possible. And so, if I may be permitted to read his
no,
into the record.
because that is not being granted to all those because it's currently on the motion, not on the substance of the bill. Okay. So if that's all you have on the motion, I'm going to move on to Representative Dawkins. Representative Dawkins, you're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions, I guess, on the motion. This committee has been given the task to kind of take up some of these bills that deal with Title 18 and other statutes of the law as it pertains to criminal activity. For me, when we are talking about this re-referral process, something that since I've been on the committee we have not done as it directly related to bills in which we are accustomed to deal with, I have a different approach as it relates to just the gun aspect of it. I mean, a lot of developed countries have access to guns, and this country has not been uniquely different in having that access to guns. One of the things you brought up earlier was around that mental health aspect of it. And one of the things that's unique about this country is the fact that we have more mass shootings than any of them other developed countries who have access to the same firearms. If we're not willing to do this, my question simply is, what are we willing to do? I'm here to do something. It doesn't have to fit in the model in which each party may, champion for. but we're been sent here to do something, and compromise is sometimes something we have to do. It may not be comfortable for some bills we may have to vote on in the near future as it relates to gun violence. My question to this committee is, what is that? What does that look like, and how can we get to that objective? Because as the chairman said in the beginning, communities out there are afraid. And if we are sent here to be their elected representative, what can we do or bring back to offer as that compromise to bring about some type of peace, of settlement, of any reassurances that their government is working? One of the main things that's broken that I've seen and that people I talk to is they don't believe that we are capable on both sides of the aisle to work together for any solution that pertains to the common man and woman. At some point, we have to put aside whatever the differences are and come up with something. And I would hate for us to adjourn, to refer this back out. I'm not saying these are the perfect vehicle to get it done, but show me or give me something to work with so we can get to that ultimate goal. And it may not be what we all want, but we have to have a pathway to get there in order for us to bring order back to the communities in which we all serve, because this is not just a Philadelphia issue. If it was, we'd be the first one to try to figure out if that is, if our district attorney was the only problem in this equation, he will be gone. And if we feel that that is our ultimate goal, then we find someone who can replace him that can do the job that we believe needs to be done. But that is not what we're discussing, because this is clearly a more national problem that we're dealing with around mental health, around access, around all those things, because we all have access. But you don't see me running into the schools and shooting them or anything like that. So we have to kind of get a little bit closer to the framework in which we're all willing to agree to, but you got to give us some type of pathway and show us where we can actually have a discussion openly to get to that ultimate goal. So thank you very much for giving me the latitude.
Thank you. Chairman Briggs. Okay, Representative Rabb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the maker of the motion. I understand why you could argue that HB 1538 could be re-referred to local government. It's a preemption bill. There are almost 5,000 municipalities around the Commonwealth. I could see that. I don't understand how the other bills would fit so neatly in another committee. And I guess the other point is, you all have are in the same political party as the Speaker. The Speaker referred these bills after the discharge resolutions to the judiciary. Speaker Cutler's a smart man. It was not whimsical that he sent these bills here, particularly since many of them address Title 18. This is under the purview of judiciary. Do you think Speaker Cutler was out of line in referring these bills here to begin with? Because it's normally where these bills would be considered. So I'm curious what your thinking is with regard to the whole spate of bills that you've put into this motion.
You're permitted to speak on the motion, but we're not in an interrogation session at this moment. So,
I didn't mean to interrogate, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, just like Representative, my colleague from Montgomery County inquired about the nature of the motion and how we are coming to decide how we're going to vote.
So that was rhetorical. Okay, then you're welcome to proceed.
Well, here's the problem with it being just rhetorical. You don't allow for conversation between colleagues. That's not your style. You won't have, I mean, you said so. So this is not.
There are lots of conversations that happen outside the meeting where there's a motion on the floor,
right.
So it's not conversation time.
Well, here's the challenge.
I'm giving a lot of latitude on the on speaking on the motion. So
I understand
you're
that,
welcome
and I
to
appreciate
proceed.
that, Mr. Chair. You also took some latitude because it's your right as chair to talk about district attorneys, et cetera, that were far afield, I believe, from the motion itself. But my point is, if this motion passes, you're probably going to adjourn the meeting, and then we won't talk about this.
I see Senator Bartolotta in the back of the room, so we would like to proceed to her bill if we can get to it today.
That would be great. I mean, we certainly expect it to be here for a while because these are substantive bills that would not be in this committee if it weren't for the discharge resolutions that got us here. I mean, the record is clear when we talk about Democratic bills being considered in this committee. This is the most active standing committee in the House. The majority of bills that have been referred to this committee are actually Democratic bills with some bipartisan support. Virtually 100% of bills that come out of this committee or that are voted on successfully and leave this committee. Virtually none of them are Democratic bills. I'm glad that for a fleeting moment, we had the opportunity to discuss these bills. But given that that's not on the table, it seems, if this motion is passed, I'm concerned, what are we doing beyond talking about the remaining bills, which are important as well, that we're missing an opportunity. And so I'm trying to get clarity in the very rare moment where we're talking about bills that we're not used to talking about, because it's not the track record of this committee to substantively address or even bring up for a vote Democratic bills, with perhaps one exception. So what I'm trying to find out in good faith with my colleague who has a motion on the floor, I'd like to understand, this is not about interrogation, and I'm not just rhetorically talking here. I want to understand, if it doesn't happen in this committee, sir, it's too late. There are no hearings on any of these issues.
Could you move along? Representative Zabel, I'm going to go to Representative Zabel.
Can I just ask a colleague a question in this very committee?
We're moving on. You've just spent the 5 minutes.
Because you wouldn't let me ask my own
Representative Zabel,
colleague
you're in order.
a basic question. That's all I'm asking.
You can ask. And
can I ask my colleague
we are
a
moving
basic
along.
question?
We are moving along.
But we're not moving along.
Okay. Would the secretary please call the roll?
This is a sham.
Mr. Chairman.
I have a procedural question.
Representative Zabel, if you would like to go ahead and speak.
On the motion, Mr. Speaker, look, these bills all belong in judiciary. We know it. They cover the subject matter. I have respect for all of my colleagues who sit in this committee, and I do believe you're representing your constituents and what they want on this. But what I can't sit through is pretending this is anything more than efforts to bury these bills. That's what this is. We got to be honest. That's what this is for. This isn't moving the ball forward. This is kicking it under the bleachers. That's fine. But for everybody who hears this, understand this is specific to Pennsylvania. Florida has a risk protection order. Just the other day, we saw, as was referred to in the opening comments by the maker of the motion, a group of bipartisan legislators coming together to forge an agreement, find common ground. That's not happening here. This is a motion to bury these bills. There's no doubt that's what's intended to happen. And for that reason, I believe we should oppose them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Briggs.
Thank you, Chairman. 2018, we had a different chairman who actually had days of hearings on a very difficult topic. After those hearings, there was a couple bills that he selected that he probably didn't support to have votes on. 2 of those bills passed, but we had a conversation. We worked together. It was bipartisan. Some Democrats voted no, some Republicans voted yes. And one of those bills finally got put into law. I'm going to answer Representative Stevens' rhetorical question. A lot has changed since then, but the most important thing that has changed, that's why I actually asked to be the chair of the judiciary, because I was so frustrated in 2018 that we had a Democratic chair who voted against those proposals. And I thought we could do a better job. We have a great committee who wants to talk about these issues. A lot of them want to be on this committee because of gun violence in their communities. But the answer to Todd's question is, I think it's clear they're sent here to bottle them up. These bills, they should be here, but the intent to have Chairman Kaufman as the chairman is because they know he will never bring these bills up for a vote. So in an interesting topic, I'm going to actually support Todd's idea, because we probably have a better chance in June when this gets referred to the Rules Committee to deal with Leader Benninghoff, who I would never think is more reasonable of a leader, but today I think he is. I think we can actually have an impact with Leader Benninghoff on these issues more successfully than we would in this committee. So I know it took me a while to get there. I think we should be doing these in judiciary, but we don't have a judiciary committee that will do this. So if it does end up going to local government, maybe we have better chance with Chairman Knowles to have this conversation, because we have not had a conversation on gun violence in 3.5 years since the new makeup of the committee. So it kills me to say that I think the committee's broken. It kills me to say that the Judiciary Committee just is not up to the task to have real discussions on gun violence. It's very upsetting to me. It's very upsetting. It's disappointing that I came thinking we were going to have a real conversation. But I'll be voting these bills out of committee, because I think that's the best thing I can do, is to get them out of the Judiciary Committee, and hopefully we will be able to make impact with the Rules Committee and Leader Benninghoff. So I might be the only Democrat, but I just wanted to throw out that perspective that they're dead here. And Chairman Kaufman's comments in 2019 made it very clear to all of us that he will never advance gun safety violence measures out of his committee as long as Chairman Kaufman is the chairman.
Thank you. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Chairman Kaufman.
Yes.
Representatives Bonner,
By designation, yes.
Dowling, on leave. Representative Ecker,
By designation, yes.
Hershey, Joswiak, Kale,
By designation, yes.
Clunk, Knowles, Lewis, Mahalik,
By designation, yes.
Millard,
By designation, yes.
Rigby, Schemmel, Stevens,
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
It's not in order. We're in the middle of a vote.
Well, it asked to be recognized before. If we vote yes, and then there's a vote on the referral, because we do not refer the bill. This is not a vote to refer. So if we vote yes to discharge, to report this bill, and then there's a vote on the House floor to not refer it to the local government committee, does it just stay on the House calendar then?
It's up to the speaker and the parliamentarian.
All right, I think it does. I'll be a yes.
Chairman Briggs,
Yes.
Representatives Dawkins, Hanbidge, Hohenstein, Kincaid, Lee,
Designation, no.
Rabb, Schusterman, Solomon, Zabel,
Thank you. The motion for re-referral of House Bill 699, House Bill 770, House Bill 1538, and House Bill 1903 is sent to the speaker. And moving on, we are moving on to Senate Bill 708 by Senator Bartolotta. And appreciate you being here today, Senator. And you were waiting out the other business. And with that, I will recognize you for comments on your legislation, Senator.
Thank you, Chairmen Kaufman and Briggs, and for the committee for considering Senate Bill 708. Senate Bill 708 is part of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, a bipartisan package of criminal justice reform bills intended to reduce prison and probation costs, better protect crime victims, and strengthen public safety. This legislation represents the final piece of a two-part, three-bill package. The other two bills were completed last session. Senate Bill 708, which I have prime-sponsored with Senators Vince Hughes and Art Haywood, will amend the Crime Victims Act to provide information and compensation to crime victims. It will reinvest savings generated through the companion legislation into victim services and will help streamline the entire process and make certain more victims receive the help that they need. Providing for the needs of crime victims is an essential part of the criminal justice system, but in too many cases, victims feel left out of the entire process. This legislation will ensure every victim understands their important role in the system and receives any compensation they are owed. I ask the committee for an affirmative vote on Senate Bill 708.
Thank you, Senator. And I will move on to council for an explanation of the bill, and there is one amendment that I've authored as well.
Senate Bill 708 makes numerous changes to the Crime Victims Act regarding victims' rights, the responsibilities of agencies that deal with victims, and the award of crime victim compensation. One of the more notable changes are changes to the definitions with regard to crime, personal injury crime, and the addition of a new definition for personal injury rights crimes. Those definitions are updated and they relate to matters for which victims may receive services, notice of events during the criminal justice process, and offenses for which compensation may be awarded. For those compensation claims, the bill also makes a number of changes, such as increasing the time within which victims' compensation may be sought and after the discovery of the crime or death of a victim, expanding the availability of compensation for crime scene cleanup to include private motor vehicles, and allowing the Office of Victim Services to exceed current limitations on the award of compensation for immediate emergency victim compensation payments in extraordinary cases. The bill has some enhancements to crime victim confidentiality. It adds the right to be notified of the confidentiality program for domestic and sexual violence victims. It exempts from disclosure under the right to know law certain records in the possession of the Office of Victim Advocate that would identify a crime victim, but preserves the ability under that law to obtain aggregate records that do not disclose individual identities of crime victims. The bill transfers the responsibility for providing notice to personal injury crime victims about their right to submit input into state correctional release decisions, notice of releases to mental health institutions from the prosecutor to the Office of Victim Advocate. As noted, there is one amendment, A04477, and the amendment further refines the definitions I mentioned previously of crime, personal injury crime, and personal injury rights crimes. It moves and modestly expands a current sexual abuse counseling program that is in Title 42 into the Crime Victims Act. It makes a few clarifying amendments in the Crime Victims Act relating to the merger of parole operations into the DOC through separate legislation, and then there are a number of other technical changes.
Thank you, Council. Motion to adopt A04477 by Representative Klunk, seconded by Representative Knowles. Questions or comments on the amendment? Hearing none, are there any negative votes on the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is unanimously adopted. Motion to report out House Bill 708 as amended by Representative Stevens, seconded by Representative Joswiak. Are there questions or comments on the bill as amended? Are there negative votes on the bill as amended? Senate Bill 708 will be reported out to the full House as amended unanimously. Senator Bartolotta, thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much.
And moving on to Senate Bill 1040 by Senator Brown. And I'm going to turn to Council Dimick for a summarization of the legislation.
Senate Bill 1040 amends the Crime Victims Act to require that law enforcement agencies first make a reasonable effort to contact a surviving family member before publicly releasing the identity of a murder victim. There are no amendments.
Thank you, Council. Motion to report out Senate Bill 1040 is committed by Representative Rigby, seconded by Representative Hershey. Questions or comments on the legislation? Are there negative votes on the legislation? Senate Bill 1040 is reported unanimously to the full House as committed. And moving on to Senate Bill 1179 by Senator Baker. Council, would you kindly summarize the legislation?
Senate Bill 1179 amends the Domestic and Sexual Violence Victim Address Confidentiality Act within Title 23 to extend confidentiality provisions to include victims of child abductions and human trafficking. There are no amendments.
Thank you. Motion to report out Senate Bill 1179 is committed by Representative Schemmel, seconded by Representative Stevens. Questions or comments on the legislation? Are there any negative votes on the legislation? Senate Bill 1179 is reported to the full House unanimously as committed. There is no further business before this committee. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.